So Willamette Falls is actually the reason that we kind of got together. It's sort of the central icon in our area. And it is a hidden gem, however. Many people don't even know it's there because we have two huge industrial complexes that have that sit on both sides of the falls, and you can't see it. And in fact, when I was beginning my research, I read a bunch of things online about Willamette Falls, and you know, it is the second most powerful waterfall in the United States, but it's sure ugly, and what an ugly setting. And those are the kind of comments, and I thought, oh dear. So it's just interesting how you could appreciate something even though it's hidden. So anyway, many residents don't know that it's even there. And it's the second largest in the United States by volume. I think it's 18th largest in the world by volume. But it's been inaccessible to the public for over 150 years because those mills have been there for that long. And why do we care? Well, we care because from 1829 about, or a little earlier, the Willamette Falls area was the epicenter of settlement, government, industry, and innovation west of the Rocky Mountains. And so our visibility is rising. Our area has now been designated Oregon's first state heritage area, called the Willamette Falls State Heritage Area. And that area includes the historic parts of West Linn, Oregon City, and Lake Oswego. That's the state heritage area. And we're working to become the Pacific Northwest's very first national heritage area. Because of what happened here in our area, America's 19th century destiny was realized to become one nation from sea to shining sea. Well, we thought, well, this is easy. Everybody knows that this is the birthplace of Oregon. It's got a great story. It's the end of the Oregon Trail, the cradle of Oregon, the birthplace of industry. The state heritage area tells all of those stories in those historic sections. So we have those three communities in the state heritage area, and we're now continuing to work on what the national heritage area is. Okay, the national heritage areas are administered by the national, well, it's under the National Park Service, but they're locally administered, locally managed, and they have nothing to do with property rights or regulation. So National Park Service essentially serves as a technical advisor to them. So anyway, we thought, well, you know, piece of cake. Everybody recognizes that this is an important area. Oh no, the National Park Service actually didn't. We were talking about, you know, this is after Slilo Falls, around the Willamette Falls is the biggest Native American gathering place in the Northwest. And they said, oh, you know, Indians always gather by falls and by rivers. Tell us something unique. So that kind of made us really frustrated. And then here we are, the end of the Oregon Trail. We have no festivals that celebrate the Oregon Trail in this area anymore. We used to. We have very few artifacts of the settlement period, that period I'm talking about from like 1829 to 1900. And so the National Park says, well, you know, I don't know if you really qualify. So we went back to the drawing board and thought, you know, before Oregon City there was Champouy. And then there's the Ice Age floods, which brought that fabulous soil down to French Prairie. And so we concluded without the Ice Age floods, there'd be no heritage area. And certainly without the falls, there would be no heritage area. So we have now redeveloped our story. So the state heritage area is still the Lake Oswego, Oregon City, and West Linn historic pieces, because the Oregon Heritage Commission is who designated us as the state heritage area. They like it to be smaller. We may petition to do it differently later, but right now that's what it is. But now the national heritage area, it's all about stories. So the story we tell, of course, the Native American story, and we have two members of the Grand Ronde tribe that sit on our board and are helping with our feasibility study. Oh yes, the feasibility study. That is the requirement of the National Park Service, is that you complete a feasibility study to tell why you're nationally significant and why you are deserving of being designated by Congress as a National Heritage Area. So, so this is some of the research that we've done. The Clackamas village was right by essentially along the Clackamas River where it joins the Willamette. And the Clackamas tribe and chiefs sort of reigned supreme over the falls area. So our tribal member this morning was just telling me that when tribes and bands came to the falls to trade, which they did from all over, they brought things from the plains and they brought things from the coast to trade, to find wives, to gamble. They gathered at the falls area, but they had to first go visit the Clackamas tribe, ask for permission to fish there, and pay tribute. Or sometimes it was a percentage of their harvest, of their fish that they took. So highest Ha'itam water is one of the pronunciations of Willamette Falls. It's Great Chief Falling Water or something like that. So the Pacific Lamprey is a very important piece of what we do because it's one of the few places, people say maybe even in the world, where there still are enough lamprey that tribal members can come and catch them, and they get down in between the rocks. It's amazing, and then catch them. It's actually a very difficult thing and dangerous thing to do. So that's that story. And then we have two national themes essentially. One is because of the end of the Oregon Trail, we have new beginnings at the end of the Oregon Trail. So Oregon City is congressionally designated as the official end of the Oregon Trail. What we say is wherever you built your cabin is probably the end of the trail for you. But Oregon City was the federal office. It had the land grant office. It had the court system, a militia eventually. It was just where the center of business was transacted. And it was the first incorporated city west of the Rockies, so it has a little bit of federal cachet. And so this is the end of the Oregon Trail Interpretive Center. Those big wagons used to have covers on them, but after almost 10 years, a storm ripped them off, so they're not there anymore. But it still is a very historic site, and that's really important. So our National Heritage Area now, though, doesn't just include Oregon, those three communities. It now includes 12 river communities down the river all the way to Willamette Mission State Park, or Mission Bottom, as Jason Lee and company called it. So we didn't also have the missionary stories previously when we just had West Linn, Oregon City, because, yeah, we had Reverend Alvin Waller, who came to Oregon City and established the first Methodist church there, but previously was Jason Lee. So now we can talk about the very first missionaries to the Oregon country. Jason Lee, who established the first Protestant mission west of the Rockies. So that's a very important story. So the second major theme that we have, so one is settlement and the beginnings at the end of the Oregon Trail, and the second theme is the birthplace of industry in the American West, or the Pacific Northwest. It's absolutely amazing. The Industrial Revolution, happened on the East Coast, on the East Coast, but it actually was replicated at Oregon City. Lowell, Massachusetts is often said to be one of the industrial centers of the East Coast. And in Oregon, at Willamette Falls, they had 10 times more output of power than they did in Lowell, Massachusetts. So it was a huge industrial complex that was here. Let me see, just a minute. Yeah, for these few decades, Oregon City was more important than Portland. It was bigger than Portland at first as well. And before that, this new, that's not the new area, but the heritage are now including the French Prairie area. Champoeg is, of course, where they took the vote to create a provisional government. And really, Dr. John McLaughlin is probably the major figure of the National Heritage Area, now called the Father of Oregon, but he really defied his company, the Hudson's Bay Company, and gave aid, credit, seeds to the incoming pioneers who arrived here at November, October, hungry, often destitute, and helped them kind of get their feet on the ground. And he was quite a humanitarian. But before that, his French-Canadian trappers, some of them Métis, which means mixed race, Indian French Canadian probably, didn't want to go back to where they came from, which is what their contract with the Hudson's Bay Company said. You work for us, you're done, and you're out of here. And they petitioned to Dr. McLaughlin, again, defied his company, said, okay, you can stay down in French Prairie, which of course was like the best land. So it's kind of interesting. The first pioneers here really were the French Canadians, and there were about 180 of them. Many of them had native wives and native families, which was actually very helpful because when the treaties were negotiated about 20 years later, their Indian wives often helped them with that. Probably the most noteworthy thing that happened at Willamette Falls in the industrial complex was this, the first long-distance transmission of electricity in the United States, both AC and DC, a couple of years apart. Now, so I was doing research on this, and the big turbines in the powerhouse at Willamette Falls, which is still there today, it's now call it PGE, but the Sullivan plant on the West Linn side of the river still generates electricity. But Westinghouse and Edison had a war of the currents. These two giant intellectuals and entrepreneurs were trying to be the first to gain control of electrical, but they wanted to be the first to transmit electricity long distances. Because, of course, at the time, you had to live close to the source of electricity. You couldn't run your factory at night, likely, if you were beyond where the wires could get to you. And so this was actually extremely revolutionary. It meant that you could run 24/7. It meant that families now could live far away. It was quite revolutionary. Anyway, so I called up the Westinghouse Museum, one of them, on the East Coast, and to find out if George Westinghouse actually ever set foot in Oregon City or around Willamette Falls. And they said, where? And I said, well, you know, the place where the first long-distance transmission of electricity occurred. Oh, are you from Colorado? So, or are you from Niagara Falls? This has been so interesting because what I've come to the conclusion is that we didn't have good marketing in those days. Niagara Falls certainly did. And everybody believes that Niagara Falls had the first long-distance transmission. And we have documentation now, and we have newspaper articles that say that we actually did that. So when we get into the interpretive section of our work, this is going to be so exciting to interpret. The Oregon City Woolen Mills, if you have had a chance to take a tour, which are offered periodically, of the closed Blue Heron paper mill site in Oregon City, you will see in the middle of the gigantic 23-acre complex, you'll see these basalt walls, which are, I don't think I have a picture of it actually. Do I? No. You'll see these wonderful basalt walls, and those are the walls of this world-famous Oregon City Woolen Mill. Let me give you some statistics because I think it's pretty cool. For a time, the Oregon City Woolen Mill was the largest west of the Mississippi and had outshone Pendleton for a time. It once employed 1,125 workers down there on that Oregon City site. It was a multi-story brick building, and they operated 109 looms and used 4 million pounds of Oregon wool annually. And now we have this great connection. We actually, in the heritage area, have where the wool was grown. Much of it was grown in French Prairie. There were many, many sheep there, and they brought those to the falls area. So that's a really cool connection. And in 1931, the new ocean liners, the President Hoover and the President Coolidge, ordered 2,000 blankets and 1,000 robes. So it really was big time. One of its someone gave me a book about it, and their trademark, were wild and crazy blankets. The blanket that I have is almost like chartreuse. It's a brilliant orange and a brilliant green squares. And they did stuff like that, besides the more sedate things, I guess, that they did. But anyway, they were sort of a victim of Australia began to grow more sheep, the price of wool sort of dropped, and things passed them by, and the war happened, and they declined. But that was pretty cool. So the next other most famous thing is the Lake Oswego iron industry. So Lake Oswego wasn't on our radar at first, and if the theme is industry, Lake Oswego was called the Pittsburgh of the West at one time because of the massive amounts of iron, pig iron that they put out. And in fact, they built the infrastructure of the Pacific Northwest. So it's another one of our national links. They also tried to build the first canal. They were trying to get it up towards the falls. Everyone was trying to get around the falls. There were multiple ways. The Native Americans helped carry people's stuff and people around the falls. There was a couple of real railroads, little cog railroads that went around the falls, and then finally, the locks were built. Well, what are the benefits of being a National Heritage Area? Well, there are really a lot of them, actually. First of all, it's pretty exciting being in an organization with, we have 25 board members, and many of them represent organizations, but working across boundaries. So we include parts of 3 counties in our Heritage Area proposal, 12 cities, well, communities, they're not all incorporated cities, 4 major rivers, and all of those have political boundaries, but we don't have to think about that. We get to work together on common goals, and it is really pretty exciting. Okay, so another exciting thing is that there are currently 49 National Heritage Areas, and most of them are east of the Rocky Mountains. It's a huge bunch of them when you see the map, which I didn't bring. They are supposed to be, and they used to get about $500,000 each out of the pot. Now the National Park Service put some money in the pot. These 49 heritage areas are supposed to stay in there for 5 years, kind of get financially on their feet, create a management plan for themselves, and then get out. Oh, guess what happened? We're not quite ready yet. Can we stay in a little longer? So these 49 are kind of heavily protecting their territory. And then the pot has never grown, but more have come in, and so the slice is smaller. The slice is about $125,000 annually right now. You know, could you do something with that? We think we can. So that's a nice little benefit. And so the process is that we need to finish this feasibility study, and it might be within 2 months of being ready, which talks about both what we want to do and make this convincing case for our themes and our national significance. So some of the things of what we do is that we have this very exciting piece called the Willamette Falls Locks. Look how old they are, 1872, National Register, but unfortunately, this is one of the things that's broken in the heritage area. So it's one of the aspirational goals that we have. Get those locks open. And we are not taking the lead on that, but under our umbrella, we have people who are, and I don't think there's a historical or an organization that we don't represent in some way. Somebody sits on that and brings us the information. So there is a very strong statewide group now that's working on trying to get the locks open. And then the other broken piece, which is, again, opportunity, is that the Legacy Project, which is working with a private developer to develop the 23-acre Blue Heron site. And this is the greatest thing. I actually sit on the board of the Friends group, which is called Rediscover the Falls, which will be doing fundraising and marketing for the Riverwalk. And the Riverwalk is the private developer, again, talk about the falls not being accessible. The Riverwalk is the right-of-way that the private developer gave all along the river. So downtown Oregon City used to be where the mill sat. And so downtown Oregon City now is at the boundary of the mill and goes north. So from here, about 3/4 of a mile to the falls, that's how big the property is. There's never been access. And so now we have the right-of-way that goes all the way. You can put your toes practically on the edge of the falls and feel the spray in your face. It's the most dramatic thing. And so the um, the designer, what are they called? Architects and developers with international experience have been selected to design the Riverwalk. And in 3 years, we the public should have access once again. Now, on the Riverwalk, it's not just a pathway. It will be, there'll be interpretive panels. There may be public spaces, like I'm hoping it'll be those basalt walls of the old woolen mill. They just would make a wonderful surround for public space of some kind or entertainment area. So that's another project within the heritage area that we can all kind of get behind. These are some photos. Oh, there's the basalt wall here on the right, piece of it that has a water flow. There was a lot of water on the property. So that is the Blue Heron site. So all of this is happening because of Willamette Falls. We think that the Willamette Falls is becoming seen and heard now. And so it's not going to be hidden anymore when these projects get going.